Okay, so you ready to dive in?
Always.
All right. I've been digging into this new batch of sources you sent over, and let me tell you, they really get you thinking about the future. I mean, some seriously mind-blowing stuff in there.
Oh, yeah. Give me a taste. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about everything from AI taking over jobs to cities that practically think for themselves to the possibility of living well beyond what we consider a normal lifespan.
Okay, now that's what I call a deep dive.
Right. And the thing that strikes me most is how interconnected it all is. Like, it's not just about individual technologies or trends, it's about how they all come together to reshape society as a whole, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the big picture that we're always trying to see, right?
Exactly. And I think these sources give us a pretty good starting point.
Yeah.
So, where do we even begin? I mean, there's just so much to unpack here.
Well, I guess we could start with the one that's probably on everyone's mind, technology. I mean, that's the driving force behind a lot of these changes, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of technology, one source claims that by 2030, AI could automate a whopping 75% of accounting jobs.
Wow. 75%. That's a pretty huge number. I mean, that's got to have some major implications for the workforce. What do they say about that?
Well, they do acknowledge the concern about job displacement, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
But they also talk about this idea of job transformation. Like, AI will handle the repetitive tasks, the number crunching, freeing up humans to focus on more creative and strategic roles.
Right, that makes sense. Kind of like AI becoming a tool to augment human capabilities rather than replacing them altogether.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe it'll even lead to the creation of entirely new jobs that we can't even imagine yet. It's happened before, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, who would have thought 100 years ago that social media manager would be an actual job?
Right. I mean, and think about how much has changed even in just the last decade with all the apps and the platforms and everything. It's mind-blowing.
Totally. So, what else is on the tech front? I'm really curious to see what they say about space exploration.
Oh, that's a big one. Multiple sources talk about space exploration becoming increasingly accessible in the coming years.
Hmm.
We're not just talking about billionaires joyriding anymore.
Yeah, it seems like it's really becoming more, democratized, which is exciting.
Right. And one source specifically mentioned SpaceX and their ambitious plans to establish a permanent base on the moon. A moon base. Can you believe it?
I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but knowing Elon Musk and SpaceX, they just might pull it off. What are they saying about the purpose of the base? What will they actually do there?
Well, it's kind of multifaceted from what I gathered. I mean, first and foremost, it would serve as a launching pad for further exploration into deeper space. But then there's also the potential for resource mining. The moon is full of, rare earth minerals and helium-3, which is supposedly like this incredible fuel source. And of course, there are the scientific possibilities. Like, imagine the discoveries that could be made with a permanent research station up there.
It's mind-boggling, really. And think about the impact it could have back here on Earth, too. Like those resources they mine could be used to develop new technologies or even address some of our, energy challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like opening up a whole new frontier.
Speaking of new frontiers, you mentioned cities that practically think for themselves. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah. The smart cities. That's a big theme in these sources. And it really captures the imagination. They're talking about cities with integrated systems that optimize everything, traffic flow, energy consumption, waste management. They even mentioned sensors that could, like, monitor air quality in real time and adjust ventilation systems accordingly.
Now that's cool. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but honestly, with the way technology is advancing, it doesn't seem that far-fetched, does it?
No, not at all. But one thing that did give me pause was the whole data privacy issue. I mean, imagine the amount of data these smart city systems would collect on its citizens. It's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? You get all this efficiency and convenience, but at what cost?
That's the big question, right? And it's something that the sources definitely acknowledge. They talk about the need for strong regulations and safeguards to ensure that this data is used responsibly and ethically and not, for surveillance or exploitation. It's definitely something to think about.
It is. It's almost like we're entering this uncharted territory where we have to figure out how to balance technological advancement with individual rights and freedoms.
Exactly. And that balance is going to be key, yeah, especially as the lines between human and machine continue to blur.
Oh, yeah. That was another big theme that kind of freaked me out a little bit. I mean, the sources talk about these incredible advances in biotechnology and personalized medicine, which sound amazing on the surface, right?
Hmm.
Like treatments tailored to your unique genetic makeup,
Yeah.
wearable tech that can predict health issues before they even arise, and even the possibility of significantly extending human lifespan.
Yeah. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff. But I can see why you'd be freaked out too.
It definitely raises some ethical and philosophical questions. I mean, how much is too much when it comes to manipulating our biology?
Yeah.
And what does it even mean to be human in a world where technology is so intertwined with our very existence?
Right. It's like, where do we draw the line? But on a more positive note, one source talked about this idea of not just living longer, but living better. Like they were talking about optimizing our health span, not just our lifespan. So, focusing on living healthier, more fulfilling lives, even as we age, which I thought was a really refreshing perspective.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's kind of shifting the focus from simply delaying death to maximizing the quality of our lives. I like that.
Right. It's not just about quantity, it's about quality. But even with all these potential advancements, there's this looming threat in the background that we can't ignore.
You're talking about climate change.
Right.
Exactly. Climate change. I mean, every single source I went through emphasized that this is the single biggest challenge facing humanity.
Yeah.
And honestly, reading some of the projections was pretty sobering.
Yeah, I hear you. It can be pretty overwhelming sometimes. But they do talk about solutions, right? I mean, there has to be some hope.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There were a lot of brilliant minds working on this, and they're coming up with some incredibly innovative solutions. One that particularly stood out to me was this idea of a circular economy.
Okay, I've heard of that. Can you remind me how that works again?
Basically, it involves shifting away from our current linear model of, take, make, dispose, and moving towards a system where resources are constantly reused and recycled. So
Mhm.
instead of things ending up in landfills, they're repurposed and given a new life. It's all about minimizing waste and reducing our environmental impact.
Yeah, I like that. It's a much more sustainable approach, and it seems like it could create some interesting economic opportunities as well, right?
Totally. One source even gave this cool example of a company that's using recycled plastic to create building materials. I mean, how innovative is that?
That's fantastic. It's great to see people finding creative solutions like that. So I'm curious, after diving deep into all these sources, what's your biggest takeaway? Like, what's the one thing that's really stuck with you?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the future is not predetermined. It's not some fixed point that we're inevitably headed towards. It's something that we're actively shaping through our choices and actions, both individually and collectively.
Right.
Like it's kind of empowering in a way.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not about passively waiting to see what happens. It's about making conscious decisions that align with the kind of future we want to create, whether it's supporting sustainable businesses, advocating for responsible tech policies, or simply staying informed and engaged in these important conversations.
Right. And one quote from the sources really drove that home for me. It said, "The choices we make today will determine the legacy we leave for generations to come." So it's not just about us. It's about the future of humanity. And that's a pretty powerful thought to leave our listeners with. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? Think about it.
That's a great question. And on that note, we've got to wrap it up for today.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
And keep thinking about that legacy.